But I think you should just say that
Yeah, I
we're,
will. Yep. Okay, it is 6:38. We're here with the Hamilton Master Plan Steering Committee. We do not have a quorum present, so this will not be an official meeting. No voting will take place this evening. But I do think it's appropriate that Tyler and team, potentially, we can just get some feedback from you on what's come in, where we are, with the draft that we're at. We can have some discussion, I believe, and then make sure we all understand the schedule going forward and the meeting that is already on the record for May 17th. Does that make sense?
So I guess there's
So Tyler, I guess with that, maybe just kind of give us an update, if it's you or Carly, on the existing conditions chapters?
Yeah, sure thing, Mr. Chair. How's my voice coming in?
could be a little louder.
Could be.
from- Just,
Could you turn the volume up?
if,
You're good. I think we're gonna volume up our end.
just a little bit. We can actually hear you, but ideally, if it could be just a little louder.
I can try to talk louder as well.
Whoop, he just maxed you up
Yeah,
a bit
I think
more.
I think you're gonna be good.
Okay, testing again. All right, I'll go forward. So yeah, our plans for tonight are pretty much exactly as Bill said. Probably we'll also end up, writing up a summary of what we wanted to get across, because obviously a lot of the committee is not here. Understandable, this sort of ended up being with relatively short notice, but that's the way the doodle poll shook out. So I think attendance might have been worse if we had done the other date. So what can you do? First of all, I really want to thank all of you for all your work reviewing this document that you've done since we last met. Your comments were extremely helpful. Important corrections, good suggestions, useful insights, all of the above. We really appreciate it. We hope you liked the document, and we hope that you will like it even more now that we've made your changes. And the CRM response sheet I sent along with that should be able to answer your questions about, what happened to such and such comment. Obviously, if you don't understand a response we gave, you can follow up with us. But that is the place you should check first if you want to know, what happened with this sentence, or, how did you implement such and such a comment. So I hope that you can read that revised document, when you get the chance. For now, that section of the plan is going to sort of go into hibernation while we move over to focus on the key issues and vision, which is going to be the main point of next month's meeting and a lot of our work going forward. Although, you will have another chance to, comment on the full document again. There will be another round of CRMs, which I will show you on the schedule. So I think I'll bring the schedule up because that's, well, actually, before I do that, does anyone have any, questions or comments about the draft or review process so far before I move on to talking about other things?
Yeah, I'll echo what Tyler said about it. Good feedback from everybody, a lot of good information on all the chapters. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to comment incorporated or had the opportunity, like Tyler said, this was, I'm not surprised we don't have a quorum either. This was kind of a quick turnaround just to kind of touch base. But I do want to thank everybody for their efforts. But any feedback, or has anyone had the chance to look in to see if anything isn't there they thought would be there, or any other further comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just
Sure,
comment.
Jack.
Tyler, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
The only thing, I was a little disappointed, this is, may I say, written just a quantum leap ahead of what we had gotten before, so thank you very much for that. The only thing I thought I was looking for and did not really see was some commentary on what had changed since the last plan, 2004, with respect to the multifamily developments that have been put into the town, whether how that fit into the overall housing section because the comments were pretty much as in the single family detached preoccupation that obviously this town has always had. And we have had these recent projects We're scheduled now for this one on Asbury Street with Harbor Light. Their new building for Wenham is in frame, and it's huge. It's absolutely overpowering. I don't know if everybody has seen it, but it's monumental, and I think we're going to have something very much like that. So I would hope that at some point you all would sort of look at these changes which have occurred in the last 5 years, 8 years, something like that, Patrick, and just say, you know, this is a direction that makes sense, does not make sense, have some sort of a value judgment. Maybe that's coming later, but that's just something that I'd like to have your input on.
Okay, thanks, Jack. So a more explicit discussion about the changes since that 2004 master plan,
Yeah.
basically. Okay. I wrote that down.
Because there's a fairly monumental change in our pattern here of development since the first days of whenever. And obviously none of them are affordable, except for the Habitat for Humanity ones. The others were not restricted. I don't think they are with Canterbrook either, are they, Patrick? I don't even know that. I know they were not with respect to Patton.
Yeah, let's separate apples from oranges. The Habitat for Humanity project is a 40B.
Right.
It's a 10-unit project. It's all ownership. It is
That's the latest one, not the earlier one, yeah.
correct. Yeah, the earlier one was 2 units. The Patton Ridge project is a 12-unit senior housing special permit project that was undertaken in 2015. The Canterbrook project was permitted in 2016 and 17, constructed afterwards. That's a 35-unit senior housing project. So there are 35 of those senior housing units. What's important to point out is that in all of the prior housing production plans, our consultants always advised us that we should be promoting different types of housing stock here in Hamilton, and all of those projects have helped to do that.
Well, the interesting part was, though, that Joanne Patton particularly wanted Patton Ridge, or she oriented that towards moderately priced, and I believe put an initial limit on of $670,000 or $75,000 each, but with no deed restriction at all. And of course, they've become price-wise right up there with everything else. I mean, it's certainly not moderately priced anymore, which I think was predictable. So I think those are some of the things that I would love to have evaluated, if you will, in the course of this thing. And I think there was never any talk of moderate price with respect to Canterbrook, and they're in the $800,000 to $900,000, $1 million bucks it ranges as well.
Wasn't there a trend in here, though, on housing numbers, by, 40B and whatever, so it could show? Which kind of speaks to your point, doesn't it? It doesn't get into particulars, although I think I'm trying to find it, but
Yeah, no,
as you read
it,
through it, it talks about some of the examples.
that's what I was kind of scrolling through, and it does it a little bit. It does it's on page 41. There are some things about the cost trends and so there is some information. It just sounds like you're
Yeah.
saying you'd like more information.
I just would like to, they are trends since the last go-round. And there was a lot of discussion here, a year and a half, 2 years ago, about country, what were they, cottages,
Yeah, cottage style.
cottage housing, and it was sort of talked about as being in the $300,000 range kind of thing. And that, of course, was voted down at town meeting. But these are as close as we've ever been to cottage housing. And if you will, being multifamily and attached and so forth, and they've pretty much gone to the moon. So it's a significant, I think it's a significant change in the pattern in this town, and as such, deserves some good consideration one way or the other by this body.
What's useful to note about those two senior housing projects is that they are market-driven. There was the original thought when that zoning got crafted that the units would be more affordable, more attainable, I guess you could say. But land costs are so astronomical here that opportunities sort of didn't happen.
It's not going to,
But
that's not going
what's-
to change either.
You know, but both of those projects did trigger the inclusionary housing bylaw, which required both of those projects to contribute significant private funds to housing that the Affordable Housing Trust granted to various projects here in town.
Linkage funds, yeah.
Notably, the Canterbrook project contributed about $500K. That money was provided to the Willow Flats project. So there's 18 units that were affordably restricted that funding helped to leverage.
No, that's been good. The linkage part of it has been extremely good and very helpful. And the amount of tax revenue that we're going to realize out of that is going to be also very useful as we go along. It's just, in terms of classification of housing or types of housing in the town, to achieve diversification hasn't really done that. That's the only thing.
Yeah, so I think what we have does, from an existing condition perspective, shows that. I think what we're all wondering, at least myself, is how do we set the vision and the goal where we want to be?
There you go.
We had cottage style. Where does the trend go? Does cost of land and everything else just continue to have 800,000-900,000 homes, or how do we set a vision? I mean, we should talk about how that gets incorporated, what's part of this initial scope and plan, but right now, I think what we want to make sure we lock down is the existing condition. And I think it might be a good point. I know we have Scott Mattern in the crowd, and I know we've talked about this before, but how do we make sure that we've incorporated the other works from other committees? Scott represents the HDC, not only from what they're working on currently, but also what they supplied in the last initiative. Would you say, and Jack or anybody at the table, or Scott, you're welcome to comment as well, and maybe Tyler or Carly, how have we incorporated into this current condition draft, things like the HDC and the work they're doing? Do we feel we've adequately done that? I know we've had a lot of meetings with different groups. Scott, you and I talked briefly ahead of this. Not sure there was a meeting specifically with the HDC in this round. Maybe there was. And Tyler, maybe you could comment too. Yeah, Scott, if you don't mind, please. Just by way of example of this and other groups that we've talked to as well.
Yep. Thanks, Bill. I'm Scott Mattern, 12 Old Cart Road, and I'm on Hamilton Development Corporation. And with the last contractor, not the current one, I believe all the materials that HTC and a lot of other people put together. There was a village plan, there was traffic, septic studies, there were architectural guidelines, a bunch of things for downtown that were provided as input. So don't want to put a monkey wrench in where you're at now. It's great you're making progress and you're going to finish this thing. But the downtown piece, as long as those things are included at some level and what the plan reflects, because it's backed up by survey data and that kind of, customer input kind of thing. So it's more of and I'm sorry to be here later in your process, but make sure that's in there. And one of the points of feedback we got last week, we co-hosted a meeting with the town about, it's called Streetscape, but it's a little more expansive than that. It's about downtown traffic, pedestrian safety, parking, a whole bunch of things. And it was a pretty surprisingly big turnout for school vacation week. Many questions about the intersection of Bay Road, Asbury Street. How do we slow stuff down? How do people walk around downtown? how to even cross Bay Road safely. And it was really, we got a lot of good input, but one of the things that came out of it that struck me was, that's cool what you guys are doing, that's good, but are you talking to the people doing the Patton Park Master Plan? Which I had done with Sean Timmons ahead of time, saying, hey, we're also looking at areas that are what's going on, so what you're doing, what feedback you get, please provide to us in terms of what do people want? Who even thinks of walking from Patton Park down to the shops? You know, it's like, oh my God, I gotta cross Bay Road. It's like, I'll drive from the shops to the post office. You know, it's just, those are things that we see kind of disrupts downtown, and we can't put in place a good kind of like look and feel of that it feels like one town, that things are knit together. So that was really good input, I thought. And there are a lot of plans. You know, you can grab plans all over the place. You talk about the housing production plan related to this discussion. You know, plop, you put it in your plan, I guess, because that's the accepted town plan, just like the Patton Park Master Plan. So I think it's, to me, that's why I all of a sudden was like, oh, we had this big meeting, got a lot of more attendance than I think expected we were going to get, especially vacation time. Patrick was there, Tim Olson, Scott James was there from police. Everybody was great. Answered questions. It was pretty interactive, I'd say. And it's not like, wasn't necessarily a lot of new earth-shaking news, but it made me, one of our takeaways was, oh boy, how is all this stuff plugged together as much as it can be? Hence my just asking that your consultants go back and check on all the HDC provided downtown materials that are survey backed up. And I know you can't just react to every latest meeting going, but last week was interesting, I thought, and what people care about. So
Yeah, no, I agree, Scott, and I think that's absolutely, I wouldn't expect last week's meeting either, but part of the vision piece I just mentioned before, that would absolutely get incorporated in. But what I really want to make sure we nail is, and I know in our planning process when we first started, we did lay out, here was all the data dump, because a lot of the folks, myself excluded, were part of that initial master steering plan. So all that data got put into a shared drive, and that should be incorporated in. We got to reconcile and tick and tie that. But also we were asked to give different groups and committees and projects going on, and then there were meetings with each of those groups.
Yeah.
We had public forums, and then we had special meetings. I can't sit here and say affirmatively, and maybe Tyler or Patrick know, like, would we say all those data points and that brought up from that Scott mentioned from the HDC earlier programs, are those incorporated in this plan? Do we know if they were on our list of, because it's a good point, we should go back to our list and make sure, you mentioned the rec plan as well.
I don't remember saying anything about
Yeah, we
it, to
can.
be honest.
Oh, sorry. Was someone talking?
Oh, I'm sorry, Roseanne was just saying, I
Oh.
don't remember reading that being incorporated specifically, but I think it's a really good observation that we should include that.
I'm sorry, is one of the things you mentioned the complete streets? Is that what you were, is that? 'cause
no, I didn't,
I was
but
gonna,
that's
you
a
say,
that
because
is
I was
a
gonna say,
state
because that's
program
in
that
here,
we
and
tend
as
to
you were
follow.
talking, I was actually searching for it.
Yeah,
but
sorry, there's a list of
Yeah.
under the HDC website, there's a list of
Yeah.
stuff on the town website, so I was just trying to refer to those. So
Yep.
I'm, again, not trying to make a detour here,
Oh, it's
because I think being expeditious now, there's a whole reason why we changed. Got a new vendor, everything here is great about these guys, been working on this for the longest time, got to finish it. So I'm not trying to cause a ripple, just that
No, it's not Ripple, it's good input. This is an iterative process, and we want to keep evolving and get it right, not just get it done. So was there a document you would reference, or if it's on our website, that we can take back through, get it to our consultants and make sure it's
I
at
do
least
believe
looked at?
Rick Mitchell, who's our president,
Mm-hmm.
who was helpful to get these new people involved too. Our materials were included in that big drive, wherever it was there. So
Yeah. I thought it
it was available. I just, now that you're getting closer to the final strokes, and after our meeting last week, I was more like, oh, there's a lot of, I have stuff all over my hard drives that I don't look at.
Yeah, you know what, Scott, I'll just make the comment that I think it's not too late. This is an advantageous time to introduce that, since we'll be having the next community meeting on May 17th, and that's vision. So I think it's fortunately in time.
All right, cool. Well, if need to, I'm not, this is a public
no,
meeting, you got a
yeah,
lot to cover.
Yeah.
If you want us to do a separate, here's a list of stuff for the consultants, as long as you got it and you considered it and it's rolled into the master plan, I am not trying to make a big thing out of it, just that it was
Yeah,
something
'cause
that resonated
I think it's
from.
worth, I know, you know how we had meetings, Tyler, Carly, you know, individual meetings with interest groups. I would have assumed, I hate to use that word, it sounds like that didn't happen with that group, and we probably didn't provide the information. Maybe we just sourced it ourselves, working with internal employees for the town and information on the website. And well, I'm gonna read through this better and
All
look
right.
for that, but I think it's an opportunity, and maybe, you know, we should circle back with Rick and you or somebody or a group and just kind of make sure we incorporate, at this stage, some existing condition stuff and the work that you're doing, you know, want to go forward.
That would be awesome. And as long as it doesn't cause any hiccup in your schedule, because I think it's imperative
Okay.
you finish up what you're doing.
Okay,
So
we'll
have-
circle back with Rick and make sure we incorporate that. And I'd like to go through, you know, and just take another look at, you know, all the meetings that took place with different groups, and we should all just kind of think if we missed something here.
Cool.
I know there's a lot of information in here. I'm not
Yeah.
saying there's not. I just want to make sure it's complete.
We have so much and so many of these different town plans, so I know it's hard for you to, now you're trying to bundle all this together.
Yeah.
It's hard to, you know, there's a lot. For a small town, it's amazing what, all the resources and studies and things that are out there. So thank you for,
Appreciate it, Scott.
Following
Thanks
up
for
on
coming
Thank you for coming in. That was really, it's like a light bulb went off. Of course, we should be considering that. One of the most important topics that we've had at all the visioning sessions is the downtown. So thank you
Cool.
for bringing that.
all right, well, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
I didn't mean to jump over you. I thought of Village Housing and
No,
all that tied, and I
No,
thought it would-
no, it all fits.
It did.
But I just think there's one other cataclysmic event that is probably in the offing that really needs to be looked ahead to and somehow taken notice of, and that's those 9 acres at Winthrop School. And something's going to happen there when that lease finally ends and/or SBA does something with respect to rationalizing our elementary schools. And those 9 acres are going to be critical, not only to the shape and feel of the town, but to ultimately bringing us to some kind of the MTA thing, the MBTA. We're now getting threats instead of saying just we're going to lose certain financing possibilities. Now it's the Attorney General is saying, look, fellas, you know, if you don't do something, that could something might happen there, and so that's just a big piece that needs to be looked forward to in order to have it come into some kind of
To add to that,
perspective.
or I could share a little bit about public input that came up about it, because it came up in this meeting with a lot of people. And overall, we don't know how much it might cost. Basically, HCC is leveraging our money, some town money, to apply for a grant to do a bunch of new sidewalks and traffic calming and bump outs. But one of the things, when you do this, you have to include alternatives, like at Asbury Bay Road. It isn't just a current intersection. What if there was a traffic light?
Got to be a
What if there was a roundabout? It's just, you can't even apply if you don't
Yeah.
put those things in there. Anyway, I'd say half of the strong oomph of the meeting was about the confluence of all the activities that happens around that location at different times. There's a senior center, the community house, the Patton Park, the school.
The train.
Tons of things, and it's dangerous. So what could we do? And essentially the input I think that we heard, so I don't know how you use this, but it was already maybe $3 to $4 million worth of stuff that was potentially in the scope of the concept that we were talking about. Essentially, I think what the consultant said is we're really not doing anything to solve all the problem that's happening around there, even in light of the potential future change of use of Winthrop School. But Winthrop School is not in the HTC purview now. It's 14 acres, town owns it, but it's not zoned like the rest of the business district. So it's the same issue as like Gordon Conwell. It's zoned for 50 big houses. It's not something else.
The town owns
So
it, so-
we're not exerting any influence over that. We have no jurisdiction or anything like that over it. But one of the things that was really clear to people was between property that the town owns, park, senior center, the emergency center, Winthrop School, there's a bend in the road, and they're saying, you know, if that was straightened out and things were a little different, everything and the controls were a little different, this would feel a lot safer. Well, we're not into moving 1A. You know, that's not within the scope of what we're doing. But one of the things that people did say was, well, what would you think about when you sell that property off if you do it to use some of that dough to fix what goes on around there? So it's just, I'm not saying this is the idea you adopt. I'm just telling you, I think there was a lot of the people there were very supportive of doing things that calm stuff down, slow it down, and not trying to be prescriptive of the future use of whatever Winthrop School might or might not be. Nobody was like, oh, it's got to be this or it's got to be that. That didn't come up as part of at least the discussion there, I don't think.
Yeah.
Does that kind of characterize the
We're getting
conversation?
deep down a hole
Yeah,
here.
can I-
Sorry.
So I appreciate it, though, and I want to keep us focused on, you know, the intent of this discussion here is kind of really looking at the inventory assessment, existing conditions, and really what I want to hammer is make sure, you know, Tyler, Carly, and team, Patrick, have we missed anything with existing programs and things going on and data done by groups that have been doing a lot of work to make sure it's in the existing conditions? So how do we circle back just to make sure that information's in here? Then, as we get into visioning, I want to make sure we drive this to everything he just started to talk about. And like, where are we going? What are the, you know, what is the visions, the goal? What is the framework of a policy on how we get there and what we do? We've got a lot of feedback through public forums as well, with great turnout, I think, at the school on a 0 degree day of what people want to see. I don't know how we put our arms around all that yet. So, yes, sir. You want to just, if you don't mind, and then, you know, then I want to make sure we circle that, but if it relates, please.
Sure. I hope it relates. You can tell me.
Sure.
I'm Jack Simons, 245 Sagamore Street, and I'm on the newly constituted Environmental Impact Committee.
Yeah.
And I doubt you've had a chance to reach out to them. We have overlapping interests with the Conservation Commission. I don't know if you've had a chance to reach out to them. But I really wanted to speak to sort of the natural resource stewardship issues here. Is this an appropriate time to talk about
Yeah,
it?
I think it is. I mean, is it another same example of like, you know, and I wish Lauren, I guess, was here.
We do have Lauren Lynch from the Conservation.
We
She's not
have that.
here,
Okay,
she's not
committee.
here, but she's
So
on the committee.
Okay.
She's done a lot of input into this. She just happens to have a meeting right now.
Great. And our committee is just sort of early on, but I'd like you to be aware of our existence.
Sure.
Our primary focus is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, municipal, not so much residential, not within our scope, but also there are some broader things within our charter about sort of natural resources and water quality and so on.
So is this, Emmett's on this as well?
Emmett is our chair.
Yeah, okay. So I
Yeah,
have
I'm
met
the
with Emmett
secretary.
Initially, I don't know if Emmett had reached out, Tyler, Carly, and if you guys had a chance to meet with him.
I remember I definitely talked to Emmett.
Okay.
Okay, so I know he wanted somebody to show up and talk about the importance of the plan.
Yeah, no, go ahead. You've got-
Focusing
take a
on
couple
greenhouse
minutes to do
gas
that if you'd
emissions.
like.
So let that be part of the record. Obviously, it's really so important in many ways that people don't even understand. Our school children are their mental health is affected by our inaction on climate issues. So there are so many reasons we should be responding to that.
I think the town's committed, right, by 2040, is it?
Yes, there's a resolution by the select board to be carbon neutral by a certain date. It's advisory, but
Right.
it's aspirational. And in the service of having a healthy town, I think I personally also agree with the need for high-density residential development that will bring more economic, cultural, and ethnic diversity to Hamilton, according with the need for commercial development to enhance the tax base. And I think the issue of Section 3A MBTA housing requirements is very germane. Something's going to happen down there, something's going to happen nearby in Wenham about high-density development, including low-income housing. And so I think we need to see that that is part of the future and needs to be planned for.
Yes, 1,500 units.
It's a big impact, and it's impact on many dimensions of civic life and the way the town functions, including impact on the environment and our infrastructure, sewerage, traffic, and so on.
Yeah, the Prince property as well as the 9 acres of Winthrop. And 15 units per acre is
Yeah, it's a
a
lot.
challenge.
Yeah,
And
and
it's-
Patrick and I and Kristen, right, met with the Wenham Master Steering Committee on that very topic.
Yeah,
No.
and as Jack said, the AG has said, you can't just forgive the funding, you have to do this. So we'll see where that
You know
takes
what,
us.
I'll just make the comment that there is no provision in that legislation that mandates it. So I think that's important that we understand that and not feel pressured. I'll just make that comment.
Okay, Rose.
There
For
are-
clarification.
But I'd say
Sure.
ready.
Just
Yeah,
let
let's-
me interject a few things here. I can tell you that the state was pulling back 10% of the housing authority's money for their FY '24 budget. If the town didn't have an action plan submitted to the state,
Action plan,
which,
right.
as I've reported to folks, we did do that about a month ahead of schedule this past December. I have been tasked with pursuing the paperwork and the applications accordingly to address what it would take to allow Hamilton to attain 3A compliance. We have been recently awarded with a $20,000 grant from Mass Housing Partnership to engage consultant services who are working right now on looking at the geographic area that it would take to comply with the state's requirements for that 50-acre area. They have quite a bit of zoning information from me that is pre-existing that we now have on the books. So as soon as we have something workable, we'll be making that public for various boards, interested parties, this group as well, because it's very important for the town. I do, one of the questions I've asked the state about this 3A requirement is what happens in the instance where a zoning proposal has been put forward to either the city or the municipality, town like us, and folks have voted it down. There isn't an answer.
That's right.
So, I think there's a very asserted expectation that towns pursue it, but I don't think that the legislation and the law is such that all the details got nailed down in time for everybody to know what all these contingencies end up needing to be addressed as. But, we are pursuing it, and we'll be making it public when we do have better information than we do right now.
But I think that's the critical point you just made, Patrick, is contingencies. If we don't do contingency planning and we get caught flat-footed, that will not be good.
Right.
So
Interrupted.
We got to be
you,
ready,
sorry.
Rosie, for everything.
Pardon me?
We have to be ready for everything.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and I agree with that, but I also don't want people to get the idea that we as a community, or any community, absolutely has to perform to the degree that's suggested in this legislation. That's my point. I just want us to understand that there may be other, lesser options.
But that's why I think we need to make sure a master plan has the framework on how we
Right.
work through those, whether it's advisory or law, and where we are, the data points, existing conditions. And, you know, we know what the charter is, but what's the framework to get there, to go through to make those decisions?
That's
What do
it.
you
Right,
think?
exactly.
I mean, as Scott said, that's town land, so it's up to
Right.
the select board really
Yeah.
at this stage, but to the extent that we're trying to put some kind of shaped plan together,
Right.
we
Yep.
probably ought to contemplate something there too, so we have a good confluence in our chair.
I agree. I think in this part of the agenda, though, is like, how do we make sure we go back and like have a list of all the many groups and committees, whether it's, you know, the Environmental Impact Group or HDC?
Bill, could I just finish my point, and then I'll be happy to sit down?
No, I thought you were.
No, sorry.
I appreciate you
I don't
coming
mean
out,
to be
Steve.
long-winded, but
No,
actually, my,
Scott was that.
my main point is as follows.
Sorry, kidding.
I want to highlight the preservation over natural resources is the first thing everybody talks about Hamilton, right? I mean, that just comes up in the master planning process over and over again. That's what people love about this town. But it is fragmented and uncoordinated. Multiple town departments and bodies with sometimes confusing jurisdictions are mostly reactive to incoming development proposals rather than proactive according to the town's long-term plans. Some of these bodies include Planning Board, ZBA, DPW, Energy Manager, Conservation Commission, Board of Health, and the new Environmental Impact Committee. Likely there are others too that I don't know about. And they all act pretty much without any integration. They're all separately doing their business. I understand the master planning process is an attempt to reorient our short-term activities in alignment with long-term goals.
Short and medium, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just short-term though.
And I therefore suggest that integration and coordination of the town's various activities affecting our stewardship of natural resources should be a top priority of this planning process. And I wish I'd come to you months ago to say this. Sorry, I couldn't. But I think it's terribly important. People are really confused about who does what. They think the Conservation Commission is conserving the natural environment. It has a very narrow scope. People don't understand how these different boards and committees interact or what the sequence is. And I think even if you're sort of working on a town body, it can be confusing. I don't know the cure for this problem, but there are 3 actions that I would suggest might be helpful. One is for Hamilton Select Board to commit to a thorough and persistent discussion of whether this is in fact a problem, and if so, how to address it. Secondly, all town bodies and departments with responsibility for stewardship of natural resources could convene initially once or twice, a couple of 2-hour meetings, simply to explain their stewardship responsibilities to one another as they understand them. And their authority. And perhaps to convene periodically thereafter, if the select board thinks that's a good idea, according to some plan for coordination and sharing of knowledge and information. And finally, the town could fund a small and inexpensive study of how other towns, including towns similar to Hamilton, may have already invented solutions to the need for integrated natural resource stewardship. Thank you.
No, that's good, I appreciate it. And is that something that the Environmental Impact Group, is that part of your charter now? Are you working towards the select board to bring up some of these ideas, or coming up with a plan, a roadmap, or suggestions?
Yeah, we've met 6 times. And we will be meeting with the select board May or June to present some initial thoughts, but really, it's such a vast scope. That I think, and this is not a statement from them, this is my personal perspective. The main focus of that group is greenhouse gas emissions and municipal ones. So 95% of greenhouse gas emissions are residential. That's only sort of on the periphery of our scope. Mostly it's like town vehicles and building insulation and stuff like that. But we're working on all of those with Vicky Masoni. Do you know Vicky?
Yeah.
Who is fantastic,
Yeah.
great collaborator, extremely knowledgeable, works probably 60 hours a week on her 10-hour salary for the 2 towns in the school district. But anyway, that's where we are. We're sort of early on, but
Right.
Well, that's the critical part, is that she is 2 towns, which is great. But I'm just, could I just interject?
Yeah, I do want to stay on the agenda, though, because we're kind of going off on what I think the root of the discussion here is really, have we done a good job making sure we've communicated with all the different interest groups, 2 represented here now within the town? I know we laid it all out at the beginning. Has that found its way from an existing condition inventory assessment perspective into this document? As we look going forward on how we set those, policies, procedures, or goals and visions, all this stuff comes into play. I just want to make sure we get all the data points in here. And at what point should we get this product out to department heads so they can get a look at it, and see, and provide feedback? Should we incorporate that as a step in our process? Or are they going to be surprised sitting on a meeting on May 17th or whenever? Because I've still yet to really, page end to end, I have, but I mean, every time I read it, I find something new. It's a lot.
It's never too early.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
I know.
there aren't that many of us. I think fairly often people think that we're in these big silos. We're not big enough for a big silo. I work with DPW, I work with the conservation coordinator, I work with the town manager and Vicky on various things in an ongoing way, and vice versa. I think that it's important that we continue to do that. There's always opportunities that we can better address, certainly working together than not.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is an incredible amount of information on the town's website that I'm forever attempting to get people aware of. And sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's, it'll hit you over the head. But if people want information, I really advocate that they pursue the various areas like Natural Resources Conservation Commission, charters, focus areas, bylaws, etc. We have it, and we have it in front of us, and we work on it every single day. And I think it's important that people, have some level of comfort that we're trying to do things that our town, our residents, the state, and the federal government expects of us.
Yeah, so I would advise us to get this to some folks to read through it. Some of the examples, like the Vickies, the Rick of the worlds, and some of these groups that, I think a lot about the homework and diligence we did was, or the team did, and the consultants for sure, was to go on the website, meet with town employees, department heads. We gave them lists of different groups that are, committees within the town. And then tonight's whole agenda was really to review what it all aggregated onto this document. And we've had a long discussion already just about some things that I'm not 100% is in there. Maybe we get some other eyes on it as well. I don't know, it's just.
I don't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to ask a couple, because about the existing conditions, about can I just ask, it's just a
Yeah.
practical question to Tyler, that I know the maps were not here, but I know that they're getting updated, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so because those, for me, reading, when I read the whole thing, for me, I really wanted, I was excited to see the maps. I was like, oh, I wish I had the maps when I don't know if other people, because so I don't know when we can anticipate those, but I think it would be important to have the maps when we send it out, to other
I think
people.
the team just wanted to get us what they had.
Yeah, no, and
from the
I
start.
mean, my hope tonight, I don't know whether other people, but my hope was tonight was to just kind of go, I don't know if we need to go through it, but I don't know if there's anything that, like, from my point of view, I sort of imagine that the Barrett team, like, if there are any, like, did they have any concerns about these existing condition chapters, any things that they felt like they needed to consult with us about, anything left over? Like, are they feeling like this is done? I know I sent, poor Tyler, I sent it at like 5:30 today. I sent an email because I found just a couple things that were just like, you know, factual things that I wanted to, which I know was beyond the time, but, so I don't know what you guys thought of as the purpose of tonight, but I'm wondering if because it's a two-way street, like, do you guys feel like, oh, this, when you finished reading it, this felt complete, or was there anything that felt like, oh, the committee needs to give us a little more feedback about that, or, I don't know.
Right. So, yeah, thanks, Dana. So I don't think there's anything in particular I'd ask the committee now. I think that we've sort of been doing what you wanted to do, which is to see from your perspective, is there anything still, you know, left to be said about this existing conditions section? I've taken some notes. I got your corrections in the email. I wrote down, you know, Jack's comments. I've been taking notes throughout. So as for exactly like when and how these are incorporated, I'll have to put them in the schedule somewhere, but we have the comments and we can obviously make corrections. And if there's like a glaring omission, we can add something back in. But from what we're explicitly asking of you, no major questions on the existing conditions right now. Just going to try to figure out how to address the comments that we've discussed tonight.
Yeah, that was my thought of tonight, was really, you know, we broke the chapters down by individuals, and then, like, individuals would be here, and we could nod our heads and say, yep, it reflects what we had provided back. I think what I'm learning tonight, though, is, like, maybe there's another step in back, whether it's sending the doc to others outside of us who just reviewed chapters, to, you know, the folks who maybe provided input, like the HTC or whatever the group might be, and say, hey, have we captured this right? You know, or do we feel like we were able to do that? You know, specifically, I think the discussion with Scott is what's standing out in my head right now. Like, have we, and you, I don't know who had that chapter, or if it's incorporated through a few, transportation, you know, or what, but, you know, I want to make sure at least the data points that we know of are there today, and we probably should reference activity that's going on now for future impact.
And I certainly, like, I don't know a lot about I actually don't, because to your point, that's true. We do tend to be silos, so there were certainly some things that Scott was talking about, right? That was talking about that I wasn't aware of, but yet some of it did ring, I felt like, oh yeah, I just read about some of that which is why I asked that about the, what's it called, Complete Streets, because that had a lot of those, you know, some of the things that.
Streetscape.
No, it was called Complete Streets. It was on, Tyler, do you happen to know where that is and what page that's on?
Transportation, or?
Yeah, that's in the transportation section, so section 2. Towards the end, there's complete streets, and your policy, I believe, was finalized in 2019.
Yeah, and it had some of the things that
Yeah.
Scott was talking about
There's more
the
of a
specifics
focus
around that
in your
Asbury.
plan to implement changes across intersections,
Yeah.
specifically downtown, so connectivity.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. So perhaps I think it's a good document to get in front of Rick or Scott, you know, and other groups.
I guess on a practical note, I'm wondering, like, what does that look like? Because, yes,
Yeah, then
like,
it's never ending.
but is it never end? Like, yes, you want some people to look at it, and you could obviously, I mean, I just did it today to Tyler. I'll just tell you, like, Tyler wrote this, or they wrote this document at a time that was in between the town meeting and the ballot vote for the Fields project at the school. So the document says this needs to be voted on the best. So of course I was like, nope, it's already done, right? But of course that's the way this goes. Like, you have to have a cutoff date at a certain point when you write.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
No, yeah, I don't
you know,
expect-
and like
yeah.
guilty as charged. I just did it today, but like, you can't go on forever. So I don't know how that. I guess what I'm wondering is, if we're going to send it to various boards and committees throughout the town and ask for feedback, how does that work?
Yeah.
Like, because I'm worried about
I'm just worried.
Like, I don't know what
There
the-
were a lot of other meetings that we didn't attend to, and we're being asked to kind of,
Absolutely.
you know, and I can't answer Scott's question.
No,
You know?
I don't disagree. I'm just worried about how
I
we're
don't
gonna.
expect, you know, a town vote or last week's, 35-person meeting, which is outstanding, to be in here, but I do expect any data points and surveys and things that have done, or groups that have been, put together to look at things on a go-forward, like the impact group or any other group, they're at least referenced in there in the section where these groups exist today and they're working on stuff. Yeah, maybe the document's not up to date on a vote was made, but we know there's a group looking at that. And then, then the kind of gap I still have is how do we get to that point of you're creating policy framework on how all that stuff comes together, whether it's density of housing and school, around transportation. I don't want to solve that tonight, but I just want the framework to know that we've referenced, data points and maps, all the cool stuff I've seen in there, and identified all the groups, that are working on stuff. They've had an opportunity to put their input in. We've got some stuff, just so it doesn't look like it's out of left field on May 17th on something we should have known about. And there's 5 of us sitting here on a
Yeah,
group of
I
11.
know. And I think as part of I actually think a lot of what the community that came today.
Yeah.
I think are really talking about vision. You're talking about the future, which is our next step. And I do think I don't know how to communicate it to the community that like the framework is a great word to understand that like we are not, this committee, I don't want to speak for the committee, but this committee is not going to say, hey, this is what we're going to do with the Winthrop School property.
No.
That's not what's happening here. But this committee is going to
No,
hopefully
that's not what framework is.
create a
It's not
framework.
decision, it's what the
Right,
process is.
Right, a framework for the people that are going to make that decision, whether it's the select board or whoever, that they can say, like, how does this decision align with the vision that the master planning created? They're not, I think there are a lot of members of the community that do think that coming out of this process is going to be that. This is what's going to happen,
And we're going to transition, I guess now, if we'd like to talk about policy and, about next steps and schedule, and maybe we can insert some of the things Dana just said on if they are part of the framework or the schedule or the current scope, I should say, or not. And should we have a discussion about future scope, if any, but I think we're jumping ahead.
no, I think
Review
we're
of the
ahead.
existing conditions chapter, I don't feel comfortable saying, do we have a document in place where now we're ready to, incorporate some notes, Tyler said he's taken and everybody else, and sit in front of a community on the 17th, set up the framework on which that looks like, I'm overusing that word, sorry, but set up what that looks like, that meeting, and at least be confident that we've captured existing conditions.
There's one existing condition. I just read my 3 chapters. I should read the rest of the chapters. But has it been adequately explored the effect of the high water table in the downtown area? Because
Let's
that is
see.
a major factor. And I hope the environmental committee is going to sort of work their way along on that one too, along with the emissions business. Because the high, we flood behind the police station in big rains and stuff like this.
There was a discussion in there about
Yeah.
I can't speak to, I don't have, but there were discussion about the various areas in town in which
Yeah,
flooding,
Weaver Pond and
in
what
which
goes on
flooding
here
is
back
a,
to behind
I
where you're
can't,
talking about.
I can't come up with where that was.
A little bit of information.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's see.
And then let's just, after that, I do want to make
I don't
sure
know where that
we're
was. I can't
sensitive to
think
the
of where
time,
that
and we'll
was.
get into, kind of remaining this and then project schedule.
Yeah, so just informational, I believe in 2019, there was municipal vulnerability preparedness plan. I think Patrick was involved in that, and Vicky was, and Wenham did one at the same time. I think we haven't followed up with reporting to the state about that. We have been interested in submitting a follow-up grant. I'm not sure we'll make the deadline. But those, I think those issues are still very much of a concern. Flooding was one of the
Yeah.
big issues identified at the time.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right, so good discussion. Great document, not to take away, but how do we just kind of reconcile that, yeah, we feel this is a good document, to Dana's point, and that we've incorporated, had enough meetings to get it to a point where it's already old, right, as of new discussions, I get it, but have we missed any important data points or documents or groups that are working on stuff in this draft? And how do we determine that? Is there a list of all the different groups? And, I think we had that right at the beginning, and we gave it to Tyler and team to go have the meetings with folks, and
Right. All of those groups were made or provided to Tyler and Carly, and many of them, I think, have been part of the discussions and the outreaches that they've worked, with people individually upon. So, I think that, a lot of that has already been connected. I think, the next step is for us to provide them with product for review, and if there are things that jump out to them that have been missing,
does have.
make sure you remind us so we can tie those down. There's always in this kind of effort, an unfortunate focus on highly granular things, whereas we need to be focusing more at the 30,000-foot view of things, like improving infrastructure, improving access, improving, our town services, all of those kinds of things. And it, when we focus on granular things like, groundwater levels on individual properties, that's granular.
Yeah, no.
And we can't really afford to have our focus consumed in things that are that granular. This is a town-wide effort.
Yeah.
And we need to focus that way. And, to the extent that granular information, will likely come from every group that we send our materials out to, that's part of the editing process.
It is, and you bring a good point, and I don't want to get caught in the weeds and never get the, that 30,000 foot that you called. I just don't want to glare an omission, right? To say, I think it is important that we call out in the 8 chapters of, the existing conditions of inventory, the assessment we've done. I think we've done a good job at that, but also we need to reference within, where appropriate, different groups that have been put together and what their charter is, or what they're working towards. Like what the HTC is doing, in their meetings, so someone could say, hey, I know there's meetings going on, or the environmental impact, or, whatever it might be. I'm just wondering, is there even a list of all those groups, so we can just make sure, if there's a slot to reference them, we could toss it in there, even at the 30,000 foot, to your point, but not get into the weeds of talking about flood levels and everything else, or particular properties that are affordable. All that stuff is good, and that's what the individual groups go through. We have programs at it, yeah, you might see, $50,000, $800,000 houses, but to your earlier points, this money went here and this came here, and that's where just the trends of affordable, 40B, whatever, housing, show that we're not going down, we're trending in the right, into a direction that we are tending to go. I don't know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so, and I just wanted to make a comment about the 2 entities that came tonight and thinking about the Patton Park Master Plan and the ultimate disposition of the Winthrop School. So, as Patrick was saying, for the 30,000-foot view, it seems like there might be sort of a final summary about future projects and future considerations to tie those all together, so that people in the community understand that we are thinking about these things, but the time is really not ripe yet for having specific action about some of these issues.
Yeah, no, fair.
Well, and again, to use the word framework, I think that the idea is that we would create something that would be useful to the body that makes a decision about, okay, what is going to happen with the Winthrop School
Well-
property, that we have something that they can actually say, okay, this was the vision that they wanted to make sure that it reached some of these goals, but it's not going to be that we're not going to say,
Right.
this is what should be on that
Well,
property.
right, these are sort of
Right.
possibilities, but we don't want to speculate because there are
Right.
so many
We
contingencies.
want to look more about, like, around the general goals of
Exactly,
what it is we're
exactly.
trying to create for the town, so.
Because I was thinking as Scott was speaking that, holy mackerel, you start with that treacherous intersection and you can morph into the Winthrop School and you can go into straightening the road. And I think, as Patrick was saying, we can't plan for everything. We have to sort of do what's foreseeable and doable in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think there's a lot of good information that's even been introduced tonight that's very helpful.
And also just like, I'm getting back to the agenda, but like, does this existing conditions, the chapters that we have, like, does this provide us with a good foundation to go forward to the vision? It's never going to be complete. There's always going to be something else, but like, does this provide like a basic foundation, solid foundation about where we are right now and kind of what our things are, what do we have in place? So that when we start saying this is what that's kind of, to me, that's sort of the question. It's not, does this incorporate, and I know I had fully admitted, I just admitted that I am guilty of it too, right? I just admitted, I said, 5:30 this afternoon, I'm sending Tyler something about,
It's always something.
because there's always something, so.
Okay,
So-
let's go over the schedule and where we're at.
Oh,
What our goal is for this meeting on the 17th, what we expect to have done and buttoned up by then. And then really, what does the scope bring us out, for the remaining months of, the rest of the scope of work, that Barrett, that your team is set up to do? Because, maybe that's, because we're having a hard time where we're at. Not a hard time in that it's not insurmountable, but we're having discussions and it's a tall order and we'll get there. But I don't know how you tie this to a vision plan and framework, to be honest with you. We haven't even talked about that as a group, right? But, maybe we can as we talk about, if one of you two want to bring us through the schedule.
Yeah, let's start there. Let me share my screen. So this schedule, we sent this to you a few days ago alongside
Yep.
the draft and CRMs. So this is not new. You should have this in your emails to reference. So let's see, a couple of these, one or two of these are in the past now. So here we are on April 26th at our meeting. So the next big item, obviously, is the workshop on the 17th. Between now and then, excuse me, the major things on the agenda are, one, we'll be getting you, a agenda and, the basic materials a week ahead of time. So you know what's coming, and if, you notice anything you need to comment on, we'll have time to address that. And then probably the most important thing is between now and then is, the outreach. I think you all did a great job of driving attendance to the first meeting. I think the turnout there was great. We need to do it again and have an equally great, if not better, turnout for this one. I know that you guys worked to, promote this at town meeting. For whatever reason, that's only resulted in like 4 RSVP signups so far. We checked again today. Sometimes, if something's a month away, people will be like, all right, I'll do it later. So that's why we need to really do another push and get people's minds back in it and remind them that something is happening. And so that is really the biggest task on the horizon for you all. And we can, talk about how we can support you in that. I think that, a lot of the strategies you used last time maybe are still good because, again, people did come to that. We can talk more about like the specific strategies to drive engagement later, but that is the big task of the next few weeks. So workshop, again, I'll go into more detail on that. After that, where we discuss, basically it's a key issues discussion. And the goal is to identify those issues and start developing a vision plan. So we'll take a couple of weeks to, synthesize and summarize the findings for that meeting, and hand you that summary along with, an initial analysis of the key issues we've pulled from that meeting, from all the interviews we've done, and from the existing conditions that we've worked on. All those combined should give us a good idea of what we want to identify as the key issues. And obviously you as the committee will have a chance to vet and edit and suggest new ones for those. So after that, the next big task on here that we've put for June 7th, these dates are a little fuzzy, but just first part of June, the committee should really engage in some sort of internal workshop, working session to really take a look at the key issues we've provided, all the materials from the meetings, and start trying to hash out what we want this vision plan to actually look like. So the way we're envisioning it is the key issue section is its own chapter. It's not going to be like, at the end of the housing section, there's a few key issues there. At the end of the, natural resources chapter, there's a few key issues there. Some master plans do it that way. But we found that sometimes when you're trying to come up with 3 key issues per section, you just kind of start reaching for issues just for the sake of having issues. And there's a lack of cross-referencing. So having one key issue section where we identify, the handful of really important things that have come out of this process. And, I think, based on the discussion we had tonight, for example, a key issue might be, the town of Hamilton needs to, address greenhouse gas emissions over the next few decades, or the town of Hamilton needs to figure out how to deal with the new MBTA communities law, or things like that. So those are the priorities and the most urgent items. So that's, and a little bit of a description. So that's going to be a bullet point list, but a little more fleshed out, those issues. So that's one key thing we're trying to get at this point of the process. And then the vision aspect of it, the way we typically think about a vision statement is it's like an aspirational statement of in 20 whatever it is, 45, let's say, maybe 2035, Hamilton is a community where it's affordable to own a house, and Hamilton has amazing schools that serve its population, things like that, like statements sort of in the present tense is in an aspirational way. That's typically how we think of a vision statement. So those are the 2 key components there. And the vision statement can be, topic by topic as well. So that's what we're really trying to develop throughout May and June. So then by the end of June, hopefully we will have the vision, goals, key issues, sections that will be, alongside the existing condition sections, basically what we just gave you with the existing conditions sections, all of those fully written chapters with a CRM where you look through, this is based on now your working session, the public meeting, and all the other materials we have. So that'll be like an actual planned draft. And so then you'll have a few weeks going into July to get us those CRMs, and then we should be able to, come up with a complete, full document with all the sections together, tied up in a bow. One thing we have not done much of yet is formatting. It's going to look nice at the end of this, we promise. And that should hopefully be done by early August. So that is the outline. And hopefully I've been clear about where the committee's responsibilities come in, what your remaining tasks are. Those are really help drive engagement for the meeting, attend the meeting, where you'll probably have a very limited role. I'll talk more about that, but it's good to attend and have everyone see your faces. Do some brainstorming about vision and major goals, and then one more round of revisions for the remaining pieces of the plan. So let me, maybe I'll leave it up.
That's great. And I think
does anyone have any
you did a good job of
questions or
dividing out-
comments about this schedule?
I have
And
a really
I think it
concrete
gives the
question.
scope they're doing, but where I think you're going to go, and what I've been saying is I don't think this provides a document that gives a framework or even an implementation of what we're talking about on how someone could utilize and take what we've done into a specific example of something that's being done. Right? I don't.
No, that
doesn't
is
sound
correct.
like
That would
that's
be the
the
next
scope.
stage that follows from this, based on, the key issues and the goals and the vision. Then the policy framework and implementation plan is, okay, what specific steps do we want to take to get there? And that's not part of the scope right now.
Right.
But that would be the next logical piece to work on. And hopefully what we're doing now is a logical step towards that. It's not unrelated. All of this is trying to identify the things that the policies should work towards.
So can I have one really, really practical, concrete question, and then I do want to say something about what you just said. I think Tyler, that you, or I think it was maybe Carly, sent to us ahead of the town meeting. I feel like we had like an actual document or a flyer or something to send out to help with that outreach. I feel like we had at one point, and I don't know where that is. Could somebody resend it?
Yeah, we had a little flyer.
I just want
and that
to,
QR
like,
code should
to
still
get that
work,
back. We did that
as a
once. I know
sign-up
we had it
link.
at one point.
So
I was going to
we
ask
can
about that. So we can-
resend.
Thank you.
so we can send that out. yeah.
And then on a higher level, just to sort of say, piggyback, I think it sounds like that the scope is this. I will say, I actually have more sort of, I don't know what the right word is, hope or faith that this kind of thing, even without maybe the more detailed framework that we maybe had originally visioned and dreamed of, maybe, I actually feel like it can be really, having a concrete vision statement, it can be really powerful. I think I've already shared this, and but like when we printed up ours at the school committee, and like we literally point at it, and it helps. Like it's like when you're stuck on making a difficult decision,
Right.
it's helpful even at a very high level to have a vision statement to sort of say, does the decision we're making right now relate to that?
Right.
So
Yep.
I guess I actually feel
agree.
like this
No,
can
I
be
agree.
helpful.
I agree. It keeps it at the 30,000-foot focus. Is
Yeah.
it in that document on the wall? I envision you picture into something that has a bunch of words that
Yeah,
rely to a
it was-
vision. We could
right.
do the same and say if it's not in that circle,
Things got to land at some point.
it's got to land. And then there's all sorts of groups that are working towards that, right, in different subcommittees. But so here's what happens though when you have a meeting, you get people together. It happened here tonight, right? You get ahead of your skis, and we were already talking way down the path. How do we maintain on focus on the 17th? What type of public outreach do we want to do? Yes, we have a document. We spoke to it at town meeting. We had it as a handout back there. We've got, what'd you say, 4 people who signed out. Now what do we do as a group to hub and spoke this out to the mass of people? What groups do we utilize? How do we advertise for it? A, to fill the seats, so to speak. It's a Zoom call. But then B, let's make sure we have that workshop agenda tight. And we got to control people and not get them down, into vision and policy, but up on what's the scope of work we want to accomplish or communicate, during that workshop. Right? I mean,
Right,
I
so-
think
I think-
we lose meetings quickly at that, and then we stay on one topic, I don't want, and not to fault it, we did a little bit tonight, right? And, I just want to make sure we can stand here as a committee and say, yep, we have that in here, we know this group's going on, yeah, this might not be the latest approval at town meeting or school board meeting, whatever it might be, but we know these are this is a current assessment of what's going on and things they're working on, and groups that are formed to work on it.
Right. So part of that will be, sort of our responsibility in designing the meeting, to design one that will keep people, focused and on track. And I can share with you what we're thinking of so far. And then as for I think the sort of separate question of outreach to get people there in the first place, there's a bunch of stuff. Obviously we'll want to post on social media, email out to your own personal networks, make announcements at, board and committee meetings, post physical flyers in town hall and other places. And one tool we have now that we did not have before is a list of emails from the first community meeting, a list of emails from the interviews we've done. We can, ping those folks that we know are interested in the process. and hopefully drive engagement that way. So, I mean, a good goal would be to get even more people to show up. And, the part of the reason for doing it online and in the evening on a weekday instead of in person during the day on a weekend is to try to get some people that we hadn't necessarily heard from, people with different schedules, different priorities. So that's a general statement on how we can try to get people there.
Yep.
So to talk about what we're thinking about the content and the structure of the meeting, I can share my screen again. Are we ready for that? I think so. So there will be two major goals and components of the meeting. I think the one that should take up the most time and be the centerpiece of it is, getting the participants talking and, giving us feedback about the stuff that will be useful for key issues and vision. But I think we also want to present a summary of what's been going on so far, both, the process level, we've been doing these interviews, the committee's been meeting, the committee's been looking at drafts, here's been perhaps when you could expect things, like logistically, but also presenting some, very brief actual information from those existing conditions, like roughly I'm thinking like, actually, I think I have this on the next slide, like one slide with a few like really high level, important, interesting details from each chapter, just to get people, on the same page about like what kinds of information is in here and what kinds of information is included in a master plan, and also to get them thinking about those issues. Some of the findings might jog their minds. Obviously people will come in with their own pet issues, but it's always good to get the juices flowing, so to speak. And so I think that in terms of interactivity, we want to save most of it for that discussion of the issues. So obviously, I'll take questions about, what the first part of the presentation is, but really we're going to save most of our, community engagement muscle for the second part, which is really to get at, again, I feel like I've said the word key issues like 20 times, just like, Bill with the framework. There's just certain words that are very relevant. So I put framework on the slide. There you go. So what I'm thinking is right now, depending on the size, we can either, of the group who shows up, we can either do breakout groups or all together as a group. That's going to, again, depend mostly on how many people show up. But either way, what we're thinking of doing is to frame the discussion as, we want to go through like element by element, maybe grouping some similar elements, like, maybe like open space and natural resources could dovetail. We'd have to think about what makes sense to go together. And get people talking. And I think perhaps a good framework to do that with would be with this framework that we've already identified and that perhaps the public is aware of. We've been talking about it, the Protect, Grow, Provide. So, we might go, okay, for the next 15 minutes, let's take a look at housing. For, housing in Hamilton over the next 15 years, what do we want to grow? What do we want to protect? And what do we want to provide? And sort of go through and do that for each element. And, it's, to Bill's earlier point, discussion always does veer a bit, but as long as it's talking about substance that can be used to get at the issues in town, it's fine if it drifts a little, but hopefully putting it in the framework will, help people stay on topic. And obviously, we'll be facilitating these, we can hopefully rein people in if they go too crazy. But that's the general format. And again, you'd have the actual materials and agenda for this a week ahead of time, but we've started designing it and thinking about what we want to do. So are there any questions or comments about that?
No, I think that's good. I like that. I think we've got to think about and talk about now, how do we get, this room full and start making sure we look at that agenda and all are on board with it, whatever, that week before the meeting around the 10th or whenever. I guess you have that out here, so.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we give it.
I guess one more thing I would say about
like we
you
did
all
tonight.
and your role in the evening. So it's not going to be as active as what it was at the in-person meeting, just
Okay.
because of the nature of the meeting. We don't need as much assistance. But if we do go into breakout groups, I think it would be good to assign a few committee members to each group. So, if people have questions about the process or the context, even if you don't know all the answers and you want to throw to the consultants to ask the tough ones, you can at least, be like, hey, I'm your fellow Hamilton resident. I've been with this process the whole time. This is what they've been doing. Just,
Right, okay.
and if we're all in the same group, you can serve that same function in the big group. But I mean, that's really the extent of it, I think.
How long is the meeting?
How long
I
does it
think
typically take?
What'd you say?
You didn't,
I didn't hear what he said.
I don't think you
Did
did.
we specify how long it'll be? I know we said it would start at 7, I think, or 7:30. Let me look at what
It
I.
hasn't been specified yet, but usually meetings like this can last to an hour and a half, especially with a really interactive group, because it's mostly about ground truthing, right? Because you can send this out to all the committee heads, but you, of course, have committees and members throughout your town who have been devoting resources and time towards all their efforts, right, in accumulating data. And you want to make sure that this is a plan with validity, and we have that funnel where we make sure that the independent pet projects make it in there, but also that we see any red flags if they do arise. So planning always leads to more planning, and the 17th will be another opportunity for that.
Yeah, no, that was well put. I think, how do we make sure those committees, I wrote it down, that have been dedicated resources, do we have a list of all those groups, just so we can, I'd love to do just like a word search through the document to make sure we've given them, we've recognized that they're there, whether or not we've updated their exact status, but that's a group. I think I'd want to see that.
Yeah.
Do you have a list like that, Patrick, or how would we get that? And-
I'll send that out tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe
And
make
that's-
sure,
I mean,
Carly
yeah.
and Tyler get it too, and let's kind of consciously make sure that where appropriate, they're referenced.
Well, and I love that idea. Not only that, it would be important to make sure that all those groups are referenced at some point in the narrative, but honestly, there might even be a use, depending on what the list looks like, for an actual list of these are resources in town, basically, that
Yeah.
these are active groups that are working towards the betterment of Hamilton,
Common goal.
Yeah, that because you don't know going forward when you get to that visioning process, you don't always know which of these groups might suddenly become more essential to whatever new issue arises in town. It might suddenly be like, oh, well, look, we have a group that's already focused on that, and now we need to really,
Right.
bring them in.
Yeah, I think that's,
Tyler, I have a question, and it's just
Yes.
made my palms sweat. So if
Okay.
on this meeting on the 17th, if we break out into groups, who, pray tell, is going to manage the digital portion of that? Because I foresee lots of people getting disconnected, and how do they get back to the group? It is my own anxiety about it, and just, if you could just maybe give a quick idea of, and support me and say that, yes, you will manage it all, you will escort us
Yes,
to the separate rooms, and then you will
I'll do my
bring us
best to
back.
reassure you. Yes, I understand those fears. That's all we've done a lot of these meetings, and usually oftentimes we've had just a point person who's not even facilitating and is just handling things and watching all the breakout groups and making sure things are going okay. So just trust me when I say that the format I'm talking about, we've done things more complex than that. Okay, and we'll make sure that we have, the staff we need there to monitor it. We're going to test it beforehand. And if things do go wrong, we will have a clear backup plan. We
awesome.
always need to have that as well. So I understand the concern. We've learned a lot about how to do an online meeting over the last few years. I think it'll be okay. So, if you need to, repeat that to yourself, I can write it as a
And
mantra or something.
I want to
But
say,
yeah, I
Rosie,
understand the concern.
I've attended several things where I was thrown into groups and then taken back out, and you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, it's breakout
Like,
rooms. And
you're just suddenly in the breakout room, and then
Let's
you
hope
get
we
a
don't have
notice
people
that
that
says,
don't.
now you're not in the breakout room. There's nothing, you don't do anything, they do it, so.
So it's all good discussion, but I do think technology and your experience will get us there.
Okay,
So
good.
do we need to think about between now and, I guess the 10th is when we'll get some materials? Do we need to
Yes.
sooner than later get either a meeting on the 10th, 11th, or 12th with the committee to talk about it? I know you guys do the heavy lifting that night, but, should we come together? And that'll be our kind of discussion before the 17th, just to all hold hands and say we're good to go. And then if we're waiting till then, what do we do between now and then, and really the 17th, for that push to the public? How do we start? We could leverage the 35 people. Scott's got emails, you've got emails from the 50 or so I think we had, and we can just dust off what we did last time.
Yes,
We've got the document, we got a good head
Yeah,
start.
no, yeah,
And
yeah.
then we if we can push it out to everybody, and everyone just starts
find the
hitting their group out there. But should we get a meeting on the books with the committee, or are we gonna just walk into this on the 17th through emails, and you guys are driving on the 17th? What do you guys think? What's the comfort level?
I think you can trust Tyler and the team to drive it. I mean, emails are always very helpful, but I don't think another meeting's necessary. I think it's just important that you guys get this out to the public over email, flyers printed, and then any sort of affinity groups that you're in.
Yeah, I think Carly's right. I mean, by all means, if it makes you more comfortable, meet. I don't know if we'll have a lot to talk with you about at that meeting, but yeah, what Carly says, it's probably not necessary, but
I don't disagree with you guys. If we're focused and all remember as a committee, we're looking back, not on the future stuff we want to do, because everyone wants to get there, right? But now it's about all the work that's been done. I do want to make sure we get a list of all the groups, make sure they're referenced where appropriate and where we can, because I would hope every one of those groups will be on that call on the 17th, and we want to say, yes, we heard you, or we didn't, or maybe there's an opportunity. If you tell us, hey, there's a miss, I'll reach out to some of those groups. I'll sit with Rick, or maybe you guys want to do something like that as well. But otherwise, I think we're good, without a meeting, but I'm certainly willing to have one if everyone thinks we should.
I mean, my 2 cents is, I think this committee doesn't necessarily need a meeting, but probably needs a lot of very specific emails that say over and over again, here's the document again, please send it out to your friends, please make sure you're signed up on the 17th, please. I think this committee needs a little handholding about
Yeah.
I
making
do.
sure that our committee gets the word out and that our committee is actually showing up.
Yeah, so was there anybody that drove that? Was it a group effort, for the last one we had in February? That we might want
was
to
a
reach out to
group.
and say, hey, rinse and repeat.
So I have a question, Carly. I remember, and Tyler, last time you gave us a great poster. Do we have that again so we can make copies and post it downtown?
Yeah,
We can
do
create a
that.
new one.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be great, and I could take responsibility for getting that to all the downtown shops. So that would be great.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
I'm
just
just
a week
thinking
before we get
about-
it on the digital
Right,
board. I don't know if
right.
we can get it on the Facebook page or
Yep.
get it out through
Right.
current
And
residents.
it has a QR code, right, where they could just scan and then it brings you to the link to sign up. Yeah.
Yes,
To
yes.
register.
So we'll
Yeah.
put it on the poster too. We'll put it on the flyer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get on creating that stuff because we need to.
So, yeah,
Start
so
that
it's
outreach,
pretty
so yeah.
much what we did last time, and that should go well.
Okay, so between Patrick and I, we'll start that kind of wave of communications and kind of lay out, here are the dates, important milestones, topics, feeding off of these deliverables, really, cutting off at the 17th, and what needs to be done, starting with the push while we wait for the agenda stuff of the public awareness program. I do think, I don't know, Patrick and I had a discussion, Kristen Kasner, really due to other obligations, can't be a vice chair. Initially I was thinking, well, maybe we just ride as a group, do we need one? I kind of think now we need one. We've got a couple of housekeeping things I think, I could use some help with, whether it's minutes, logistics, things like that. Maybe that's something we'd have to meet to do that, but I'm curious of your thoughts as a committee, if you think we just run as is. And I feel like it's a good group, no one's shy. I don't need titles in different groups. We can all do it, hold hands and do it, but I do think there are some things I want to button up, you know, as kind of the chair here, and that, having someone to do that would be helpful. I don't know how we do that from here, though.
Well, I
Unless I
think,
just-
I think we can't really vote because we don't have a committee, but
Right.
I certainly think you as the chair can reach out and ask somebody, say, can you please help me with this?
Okay, so look for some of those communications too, some housekeeping things.
Yeah. I think it's.
Yeah, I think that's
I
what I
think
was
it's
gonna.
important to ask for help, because I
Yeah.
think that's
Right,
good information for us, that you're feeling like you need a little,
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we've sort of done that a couple times, and it didn't yield very much, but it's worth a try.
Yeah, true. There's not a hammer. I can get a hammer. No, I'm kidding. All right, any other future business we want to talk about now? Otherwise, we're gonna, look for some emails that are gonna really lay out crisply what's gonna go on between now and the 17th, and some asks and deliverables and of what we're gonna need to get there.
Yeah.
I guess my only future business is, it has on here future meeting dates, and I don't think we should set those with only this many people here, but maybe we can get out a poll or something so that we can get them set up. Like, it's better, it's always easier to cancel a meeting than it is to call a new one, so let's get some on the calendar.
And it sounds like people feel like we're good through the 17th, and we need something, maybe start polling the week after that. Kind of wrap up what we just did, and kind of let's start talking about the next milestones.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, with that.
One last piece, folks.
yes.
As we wrap up this evening, this is my last meeting with all of you.
What?
I'm actually leaving Barrett Planning. I'm sad to say my partner and I were moving to New Mexico. So I will miss you all, and I look forward to keeping up with your process through Tyler and Judy, of course. But I have to say, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you and knowing Hamilton and getting to know this beautiful town that you guys call home. So thank you so much.
Well, I wish you well on your next endeavor. I want to
Thank
thank
you.
you have been a huge contributor to this program. So I appreciate all that you've done. You will be missed, but I'm happy for your next venture.
Yes, you.
Thank you. And if you're ever out in
really
Santa Fe,
will.
stop into City Hall. I'll be there.
City Hall, huh?
Yeah.
Nice.
Carly, thank you for your work. It was,
Yeah,
it
thank
was
you.
really a pleasure to work with you. Thank you.
Of course. Of course. Well,
Yes,
thanks, folks.
Congratulations and good luck.
Tyler.
Yes, we'll all miss Carly very much as well. And don't worry, we'll rope someone else from the firm in, at least one other person, to help fill the gap for meetings and engagement. As wonderful as Carly is, we have people who are just as wonderful, as hard as that is to believe.
No, it's evident. You're equally as good, and I'm impressed with the organization, I'm sure. So I'm not worried in the least. So thank you very much. I guess we don't need to take a motion to adjourn, since this
Nope.
was just a discussion.
That's right.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Jack, thanks for coming down as well. Always a pleasure.
Pleasure.
We'll make sure we connect, and,
I hope I wasn't.
Thank you.
oh,
I did not mean to be disruptive.
You weren't. Not at all. I love it.
Scott.
This is why I like to do this stuff, is, yeah. When people come out, it doesn't happen all the time, so I appreciate and
It's a
thank you for
great
that.
audience, yeah.
So, all right.
Set that-
That's
Night, you
it.
guys.
Well,
We're good.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great night,
Bye, folks.
everybody.